So, where are we? We sort of said that we need to define AI, and in the process of defining AI, we came up with several candidate definitions. Definitions like a system that can think like humans is AI, a system that can act like humans is AI, a system that can think rationally is AI, a system that can act rationally is AI. Now, we critiqued these definitions and finally, we came to the conclusion or somewhat that acting rationally is a good idea, right. We should think of AI as acting rationally because there are less issues with this definition and there are some issues with other definitions. Okay. So far so good. But we still weren't able to answer, we haven't yet gone to a place where we can answer what is acting rationally, in particular what is rationality, right. We said that thinking like humans and so on are non-operationalizable definitions, but we need to operationalize rationality at this point and that seems daunting as well. So, let us think about the idea of rationality, and I will also say that this is the rational agent view of AI, right. There are different views of AI as science, AI as engineering and so on, but this is the agent view of AI. The agent view of AI is that there is this organism, right. Now, this organism need not be a living organism, need not be even a physical organism. It could be just like a internet organism or digital organism for all we know, but think about it from an organism point of view, right. An organism has, like we have hands and mouth and eyes and ears. Eyes and ears are our sensors, hands and mouth will be our effectors, will be the way we can change the world. And in the same way, an AI agent or an AI based agent will be situated in some environment, and it will have some sensors, and those sensors will tell the agent the world that it can observe, aspects of the world that it can observe, and it will have effectors, and these effectors will be able to change the world, right. So, now we need to create some computational part in this agent, which is going to decide what should this agent do, what should this organism do, right. The part that would decide, that would understand the world, that would decide the actions and so on and so forth, we can informally call it the brain, but that will be the AI part of the organism. So, in reality, when people start building AI systems, they eventually realize that AI is a small part of the big picture. Like if you think about us as people, how big is the brain? It is not tiny, it is not like a small insignificant part of the body, but it is not the full body, right. There are lot of organs in the body, they all have their needs, if any one organ goes bad, the whole organism stops to function. So, everything is important, our heart is important, it stores and gives the energy, our legs are important, these are our effectors and so on and so forth, but the brain is also extremely important, and some people will argue that the brain is slightly more important than other organs, because if brain goes bad, the whole organ goes bad, and you can we can debate that. But in the very same way, if you think about a digital organism, let us say which lives on the internet, then it must connect with the internet using networking, and that would be part of its organism, that would be part of the organism. It may have some sensors, it may be able to read, it may be able to look at the images, etc., etc. All those would be part of this organism. It may have various layers, the data management layer, the databases layer where you can query it, there may be plugins with how do you distribute a particular data across many servers, etc., etc., etc. And all these various aspects that you study in computer science are going to be important when you create this real organism, right. But how do you control this organism? When do you figure out what to store? When do you do computation? How do you choose what answers to give to the query that has come out? All of those will be considered or may be considered the brain or the AI part of the agent, right. So, again the point that I was trying to make is that if you really think about creating an AI based startup or an AI based system someday, you will first have to create all these various aspects. before you can start thinking about creating a high quality brain. High quality brain is extremely important, but at the same time it is important that the other parts of the organism are developed so that the brain can actually control something and sense from something, right. Okay. So, with that in mind, let us think about the rational agent now, right. So, we have now got an agent, we now want to create its AI brain, and the question we have to ask is what actions should it do, right, and and we want to define rationality in this process, right. So, the idea of rationality is more or less it should do the right thing, but of course, that is not, that is very vague, right. What is right for me can be wrong for you, right. We have so many multitudes of people in this country and in the world, and what is right for one community is usually not right for the other community, we all know this. So, how do we formally computationally define the idea of right? And the way we are going to define it is by defining a performance measure. The performance measure in this particular case would be an objective criterion for success of an organism, right. This objective criterion would be given to this system for now. So, we are not going to think about what is the right objective function, because that leads us into territory which is extremely complicated. Okay. We will for now consider the AI system has been given an objective function. It is like you have been told by your parents, this is how you have to live your life. This is right, this is wrong, this is what you need to optimize, and you are just living it. Now, of course, that does not make for a really intelligent person, but for now we will say that we have quote unquote a master, a human for example, which will tell, who will tell the AI system, look, this is what your goal is to optimize, this is what you need to optimize, and that is your goal. Okay. For example, if it is a vacuum cleaner robot, it could be the amount of dirt it has cleaned up, although there are challenges and we can talk about that later when we get into human AI interaction, right. But there could be other parts of the objective function, like the amount of time it takes, the amount of energy, electricity it consumes, amount of noise it generates. For example, we can hear some noise generated by the top floor because of some construction, and that is disturbing us. So, that is not optimizing our objective function today, right. So, we will create a value system, we will of the AI system, we will create an objective function for the AI system, which will have these various components, and then we will somehow combine them into a single objective function. Now, given this objective function, what should AI system do? It should take an action such that this objective function is optimized. Right? If it is a minimizing function, it gets minimized. If it is a maximizing function, it gets maximized. So, that therefore becomes the definition of AI, or a definition of an ideal rational agent, right. So, again, so it is in a world, it is in an environment, so it is observing. So, it's the definition says that for each possible percept sequence, what is a percept? It is what you observe from the world in our ways, what my eyes see, what my ears see, and the sequence of observations like that. That is the input to me, right. What is the input? What I know, what I can see in the world, what I can sense in the world, that is my input. Now, for each possible percept sequence, the agent has the ability to take an action, and it should take the action that maximizes or optimizes its performance measure, right. So, the agent is given some optimization function, the agent sees and observes the world, and on the basis of that the agent decides this is the action I should take. But there are two more components in this particular definition. The first component is on the basis of the evidence perceived so far. This is extremely important. See, how many times we have been in a situation where we did something, and after we did this, something wrong happened or something bad happened, something that we did not expect happened. And then we felt like, oh man, I did not make the right decision. Have you been in such a situation? Do you feel bad that we did not take the right decision? How many of us feel bad? Sometimes, They have been in situations. You are all wrong. Why are you wrong? It's very important to realize that this whole idea of feeling bad about the past decisions needs to be thought again. You must not regret. Regretting a past decision is not a very intelligent and wise choice, and I'll explain why. See, when you took the decision, you did not know how the cards are going to come out in the future. Fair enough? You only had some expectation about how the world will look like once you take this decision. You cannot predict the future. You are not an astrologer. And by the way, even astrologers can't predict the future. Right? They say they can. At least that's what I believe. So, you think that the future is going to be like this because you don't know the future. You only have some model about how the future looks like. And you took the decision based on whatever you knew at that point in time. And now, after you made that choice, various things happened in the world and your action ended up being quote unquote what you think is not the right action anymore. But that does not invalidate the action that you took once upon a time based on not knowing what is going to happen in the future, right? The best you can do is to use whatever your prior knowledge is about how the world looks like, of how the world will behave when you take this action. Moreover, at least from a psychological point of view, you are comparing a life that you lived and you know each little detail about that particular life. Once is a life that you believe you would have lived if you had taken a different decision then. This is not even a fair comparison, because you don't know what little things would have happened if you had taken a different decision long back. Does that make sense? Is it too right? So, the point is, and I learned this firsthand when I was a young kid, and I had an uncle who came back to India 20, 25, 30 years ago from the US. Okay. And this is pre my IIT days, I was a young student, young child. And so, once I asked him that, do you think you made the right decision? And he gave me a very philosophical answer. He said, of course, I took the right decision then. I did not know exactly what is the life I would be leading when I come back to India and join a particular job at a particular place, right? We didn't know that. And today, if you asked me what decision would I would take a different decision, he said. But that does not invalidate my past decision. Moreover, this comparison is not fair, because who knows if I lived in the US, what problems I would have encountered there and how my life would have looked like today. Maybe at that point I would have felt that, oh, I should have moved back to India long back. You never know these things, and in fact, in our world where we live only one life and we cannot backtrack our life to a previous point in time, time travel has still not been operationalized in practice, maybe someday. It is impossible for us to really do this comparison. And so, whenever you get into this situation where you feel like you took a bad decision long time back based on which you are suffering today, think again. Most likely you did the best decision you could have taken then. Now, not always. There are people who just who are not able to think clearly, or who just go into a very emotional state of mind and make choices without really thinking about what it is that they know even at that point in time. And then yes, you can feel bad. You can say that I was a fool long time back. That's okay. So, what is very important are two points here. What is the basis of making my decision? And the definition of ideal rational agent says, on the basis of evidence perceived so far. So, if something else happens in the future and I couldn't predict this at least in a high probability way in the now, that does not invalidate my decision, and also on the basis of my built-in knowledge. So, there are some things I know today, there may be more things I will get to know in the future, but I will only assess my decision based on whatever it is that I know today. Okay? So, therefore, it is important to realize, let us talk about built-in knowledge, by the way, it is actually an important point. So, think about a 4-year-old child. Let's say you have just started talking to them about, one digit addition. You have just said, oh, 2 plus 3, and the child says 5, and so on and so forth. And just for fun, you ask the child, what is 8 plus 7? And the child says 15. You are like, wow. And then you say, okay, what is 15 plus 12? And the child says 27, and you are completely in awe. Well, these things don't happen very easily, but if they happen, what would you call this little child? You will call this little child very intelligent. We are in the AI course. The word intelligence has to come in every so often, right? We will call such a young child intelligent. But suppose I ask this gentleman here and say, what is 15 plus 12? And he says, it's 27. Would we call him intelligent? He may be. We are not questioning his abilities. But this particular demonstration would not lead us to making the conclusion that he is intelligent. Why is this so? Why is this difference in our assessment of intelligence with a young child versus a grown up man? And the difference is very obvious. The difference is that we have all learned 2 digit addition, maybe in class 1 or class 2 at some point. Now that we have learnt the 2 digit addition, the ability to execute it and give me an answer does not qualify as an intelligent behavior. It may be a fine behavior for that particular question, but that does not constitute intelligence. On the other hand, if there is a concept I do not know, and then I figure out how to do this, that may be considered intelligent, right? You may find some friends or family members who do really well in known environments, but who get extremely uncomfortable in a new environment where, let's say, they have to start playing a new game and they can't figure out how the game works, or they have to start talking in a new setting and they take a long time to learn, right? I would say that that's an intelligence question. How quickly can you adapt? How quickly can you infer? Similarly for theorems, if I gave you the proof, you memorized it and put it down in the exam, that does not call for intelligent behavior. On the other hand, if I gave you a new conjecture which you had never seen before and then you are able to prove it, that will be called intelligent behavior. So, in the very same way, what is intelligence, therefore, is heavily dependent on what it is that you know ahead of time. If you already know the answers to the questions that are going to come your way and you just read those answers and output them, then that would not be considered intelligent. So, knowledge and how much knowledge have I given to the system is absolutely important in figuring out what is intelligence and what is not intelligence. So, just to summarize this picture, summarize the definition of rationality. The goal for an ideal rational agent is to maximize or optimize its objective function. It would optimize its objective function by taking actions. So, if it does not have any power to take actions, from the point of view of rational agent, AI ceases to exist, right, because our definition of AI was acting rationally. On what basis would the agent choose its actions? On the basis of what it knows already about the world, built-in knowledge, how to do 2 digit addition or not, on the basis of evidence perceived so far as possible percept sequence, right. And therefore, an ideal rational agent need not be omniscient. It need not know everything about the future. It need not be an astrologer. Rationality has nothing to do with what is going to happen in the future or what it is that I do not know. It is only about I will do the right thing based on what I know, right. And moreover, this definition also enables the possibility of you acting in order to obtain information, because there is something you know and there is something you do not know, but then there is something you know that you do not know. Like for example, you do not know which class is going on in the neighboring room, and if for any reason there was a reason to figure that out, you can go inside that room and figure out what class is going on, and that would be considered intelligent behavior if in the long run you are able to optimize your objective function. So, in other words, sometimes I may have to act in order to learn about the future or learn about the present, things that I know that I do not know, and there it is very valuable to take those actions, because in the long run I am going to optimize the objective function. And therefore, in an ideal rational agent view, we often talk about long term intelligence, long term optimization as opposed to very immediate and short term optimization. And we will talk more about this particular facet of AI when we get to Markov decision processes. So, everybody okay with the definition of rational agents? Yes, question. What if we do not know a single valued performance measure? What's your name? Vishwajit. So, that is a very good question, right. What if we cannot figure out a single value performance measure, right. In fact, one can argue that we as people have multi-objective criteria that we are optimizing. We all want to be rich. Is there anybody who does not want to be rich? We all want to be famous. Is there anybody who does not want to be famous? We all want to be healthy. Is there anybody who does not want to be healthy? We all want to have a spouse, somebody we really like or love, or at least a good partner we can spend our life with. We all, and many of these things are not achievable, right. So, you will start finding that there are many things that you are optimizing, but we will ascribe different importance to different of these sub-objective functions. Like some people will say, I am willing to let go of a lot of money if I can get fame, and they become professors. And there somebody may say, oh, fame is good, but I'd rather make a lot of money for my family, and they become engineers at Microsoft. And then there are some people who say, I'd rather become rich and famous. Who cares for anything less than that? They start a startup, and very few of them succeed, but that's okay. They have higher risk taking ability. Some people say, I can take a lot of risk. They start startups. Some people say, I don't take a lot of risk. They only get jobs in large companies. Some people say that healthy is important, but if I have to choose, I'd rather die at 40 and be famous, and but instead of living until 65 and not doing anything worthwhile in life. They make decisions one way, become Bhagat Singh, or whatever it is, right. So, the point I am making is we all have slightly different ways in which we make those decisions. And if I had to ask you, how much more newspaper articles are worth $1,000 a month, you will not be able to answer this question. Like, what the heck does that mean? How do I compare fame in some criteria versus money in some criteria? That just does not make any sense whatsoever. So, that is the philosophy, right. So, coming back to the question that Vishwajit asked, what can you do if there are really multiple objectives for an AI system, like time and noise and amount of dirt and electricity and so on and so forth. There are many models that study multi-objective. One model says create a linear approximation, linear interpolation, or a some kind of a combination, create a single value function that is a combination of all objective functions, like 0.5 into fame plus 0.3 into money and so on. Right. Then other people say that is very hard, right. So, I will create a constrained optimization problem. So, I will say I want to optimize my money subject to spending no more than 1 year of time, whatever, right. I want to optimize one value function subject to my battery being less than my maximum battery, for example. That would be a typical way of doing this. These are called constraint optimization problems, and these are very hard to solve. The other objective function way is to say, okay, I am not going to ascribe any value to how much one is important and how much the other is important. I will just optimize for all the criteria in a way that I output a Pareto optimal set of solutions. Now, this goes into advanced AI, which we will not talk more about, but the point is that they define non-dominating sets of solutions, where in a solution where I make $1 million and my healthiness is 0.5, whereas in another one I make $100,000, but my healthiness is 0.8, you say that, look, I can't compare these two solutions, because in one case money is higher, health is low, in one case health is higher, money is low. There is no way to do this comparison. So, I will output both of them, and I will let a downstream master figure out which solution is appropriate for them. So, all these non-dominated set of solutions are called Pareto optimal set of solutions. Like for example, if I have one solution $1 million 0.5 health another solution $500,000 and 0.4 health, then we will say, oh, the second solution is obviously terrible, because it has even worse number for health and worse number for money. So, I will not output it, but anything which I can't compare directly, I will output it, and that is called Pareto optimality. So, there is a branch of AI which studies multi-objective criteria. Anything that we discuss, you can create a multi-objective version of it, but we will not talk about it in this course. Good question. Any other questions? So, this is a good point to stop, and we will meet tomorrow. Thanks.